Welcome, everyone. Welcome to this series on the biggest deep tech trends in 2022, brought to you by Hello Tomorrow, NGK, and BCG. Today, you're going to get a sneak peek at some of the most important trends in healthcare for 2022. I'm Renita Calhorn, an executive coach who specializes in working with deep tech founders and the moderator for today's panel, which, as always, features a diverse range of expertise. So Saurabh Tak has a PhD in molecular biology. He's had business roles at biotech and medical device companies and is currently a deep tech and innovation consultant at Hello Tomorrow. Malvika Verma Miller has a Bachelor of Science from Caltech and a PhD from MIT. She's currently a project leader at BCG, advising clients on technology and healthcare investments. And she also maintains an academic affiliation at MIT, where she's translating novel medical drug delivery systems to improve patient care. And then Glenn Davis is on the business side of healthcare. He's been there for nearly 2 decades, both at startups and multinationals like Siemens. And he recently joined NGK Sparkplug as their global general manager for smart health. So I invite the panelists to add anything that I missed once we get into the discussion. But before we do that, let's just take a quick look at Hello Tomorrow. So you can kind of put all of this into context. Where are these trends coming from? So Hello Tomorrow's mission is to act as a catalyst to accelerate the development of radical solutions that are focused on impact. So nothing less than improving the health of humans and life on our planet. And that means leveraging 2 things: the power of deep tech and collaboration of a global ecosystem to generate solutions for industry's biggest challenges. And they do this through this synergistic model, this global ecosystem of over 10,000 startups, VCs, and experts that they cultivated over the years. And they can then bring this to their collaborations with industry leaders in helping them anticipate key trends and then build ventures to take advantage of high growth business opportunities. And since 2017, Hello Tomorrow has been partnering with BCG to produce very thoroughly researched reports on different aspects of deep tech. And you can download all of these for free on the Hello Tomorrow website. And this year, 2022, they're picking up the pace with webinars like this one and reports throughout the year that showcase 20 trends across 6 major themes. So food and agriculture, health, energy and environment, mobility, computation, and regenerative industries. And since you've registered for this webinar, you'll get a copy of the Inclusive and Affordable Healthcare Report direct to your inbox. And there you will find some of the most mind-boggling innovations that Hello Tomorrow startups are developing in healthcare. Some of my favorites are the 3D printed replica of a patient's head that can mimic how they'll respond to radiation treatment for brain cancer, and orthopedic implants that are made of magnesium that, unlike those steel pins that stay in your body forever, these will simply be absorbed and biodegrade over time. So there are a lot of exciting things going on in healthcare. And today, we're going to zoom out and focus more on the macro view of healthcare in 3 areas. So 1, making healthcare more accessible and affordable. 2, understanding how corporate and startups can work together to accelerate this innovation and new business growth. And then 3, the investment landscape in biotech, especially in the context of the pandemic. So Saurabh, let's start with you. And why don't you give us sort of the bird's eye view? What are the main themes in this year's healthcare trends? And how did you go about identifying and then curating them?
Thank you, Renita, for this really, really cool introduction. So I am deep tech lead, not consultant at Hello Tomorrow. Coming to how we structured these trends is basically, it all started with global challenge like 11 years ago when Hello Tomorrow came to be. And what we get is thousands of startups applying for this global challenge, coming from all over the globe every year. So it's like 4,000 to 5,000 of the startups that apply for the global challenge. And we then sit together in the team and we select the best of the best, let's say around 700 to 900 of these. And we name them as, or we nominate them as pioneers, deep tech pioneers, in short, DTPs basically. And we select them on the basis of the impact that the technology is making on the planetary health or the human health, basically in this context, specifically in this context.
Mm-hmm.
And on the novelty of the technology, among other criteria, which can be team and patents and so on. Then these DTBs are then eligible to basically be in touch with the investor community that Hello Tomorrow has curated over the years. And we have a couple of dedicated events that we do in the year, which are only dedicated to these things. But this selection somehow puts us uniquely in this position where we are able to have a very grand vision of the emerging technologies, a very big global idea of the technologies that are and are continuing or will continue in the future, basically, to shape the human health, the planetary health, and the market, of course, along with it. So this is the knowledge that we have put together in the trends report. And as you said, as we mentioned, healthcare report is basically second in the series of 6 reports that we are publishing this year. The first one was food and ag, and now this is the healthcare report. And one thing that we really want to bring across, bring from this report is how the technologies, both digitization and deep tech, are making the healthcare more affordable and inclusive. It's what is being said over and over again for years now, that one size does not fit all. So one kind of treatment might not be applicable to everybody, bringing us to personalized medicine. But this is now being realized by the technologies. I think it's more and more becoming real, personalized medicine. But this report also kind of focuses on the problems that the current healthcare system is focusing or facing, basically. For instance, I mean, COVID-19 is definitely not the last pandemic. 2 days back, WHO announced that monkeypox is the new pandemic. And I mean, even if I do not go to monkeypox, COVID-19 itself hasn't been completely been controlled. In France, the numbers are rising again, right? So, I mean, there are a few key issues that we would like to handle, and we have addressed in the report, like HCP overload. What can you do for reducing the healthcare professional overload? How can you make clinical trials, let's say, less cost efficient, so that the eventual drug is also more cost efficient, making the drug in the market more inclusive and affordable for everybody? What has been shown because of the pandemic is a rise in point of care treatments, because there was a lack of HCPs and there was a hospitals overload. So you have to have point of care treatments to reduce this HCP and hospital overload. And we have divided the report finally into 4 segments, basically. So one is heavily focused on the digitization of health tech, which is digital patient twins, like you were mentioning with the startup RTSafe. Then we have next generation diagnostics, where we have brought in new methods of imaging and molecular diagnostics, almost futuristic. I mean, I have been in the field for last 15 years. And when I started and now, it's almost looks like everything has changed completely.
I bet.
Regenerative medicine, I mean, which can be cellular therapies, immunotherapies, etc., or the one that you talked about, medical magnesium, basically, the startup. And novel therapeutics after the COVID era, where things like mRNA and DNA therapeutics are more being readily adopted in the market.
Yeah, thank you. So you've given us now the broad view of how you've gone through the Hello Tomorrow startups, which I believe are in 128 countries. So we're really talking about a diverse group or the diverse approach to innovation. Now let's go maybe a little more focused to Glenn, who's at NGK. And where is NGK positioned in all of this, in this healthcare transformation that we're seeing? What are some of the key areas you're focused on, and what would you like to share?
Thanks, Renita, and good morning or good afternoon to everyone who's listening today. At NGK, we've had a long history of innovation, and as a global company, we've certainly been focused on bringing impactful technologies to people, basically contributing to society. And uniquely, we're headquartered in Japan, and that probably gives us a very interesting, I think, situation where we're at certainly the center of a serious global issue of the aging population. Japan is actually, if you look at the WHO, they've got some very good, for those of you who are in healthcare, I seriously encourage you to look at some of their reports about the super aging. And in Japan, we're forecasted to have over 32% of the population over the age of 60 by 2030. And globally, at that time frame, which unfortunately doesn't look that far away, 1 in 6 people in the world will be over the age of 60. And this has important ramifications, not only for healthcare, taxation base, and really how governments and countries deal with access to care, which is, really quite significant. If you go further, which is quite frightening, but, in 2050, 2/3 of the world's population are over 60. And that's also in these low and middle income countries. So you can see that really we can't do healthcare as we've been doing. Something has to significantly change. Certainly here in the US, I think everyone knows we spend an outlandish is probably the best word, a percentage of GDP on healthcare, yet we don't have very good outcomes. And, if you think of the US, we do have, the baby boomers are now growing up, and they're going to be part of this. And I was reading the other day that, by 2034, so again, not very long, there are going to be more adults over the age of 65 than children under the age of 18. So this has significant ramifications, I think, in the way that we're going to have to change in the way that we deliver healthcare and also cost effectiveness. I think, as sort of Sarab mentioned, the pandemic has seen a lot of changes, and in some ways has additionally accelerated some of the dramatic shortages we see in nursing. And it's not hard not to read in the Wall Street Journal or any broadsheet newspaper or media about, physician burnout, which has also been accelerated by the pandemic. So I think from a focused sense, it's, creating and developing cost-efficient digital health solutions for home health and also tech-enabled services. They're going to play a key role in this transformation.
Yeah, and it sounds like Japan is kind of in that perfect storm where they can really be testing some of the products that you're coming up with. So what are some of those products that you're testing and innovating?
Well, I think we all understand the drivers in healthcare. And I think we've been very fortunate in some ways that some of the technological advances we see in everyday life can also be applied to healthcare. I mean, if everyone thinks back 10 years ago, the way you kind of went to see a clinician hasn't really changed since your parents' days. You physically went down to an office and spoke to someone. And if you think about, I love music. I'm sure everyone else does. Once I've got my prop here, look, for those of you who remember,
oh, wow.
Once upon a time, I thought having 7,500 songs in my iPad was pretty amazing. And now, of course, with Spotify, which my daughters tell me is, an unlimited choice of my 80s music from Stranger Things, it really has changed, I think, the capabilities of which we can deliver healthcare. So I think now, if you think about it, a combination of sensors, whether it be blood pressure monitoring or SpO2, some of the sleep developments, in combination, sensors and your mobile phone, these are sort of the enabling tools to help develop, new forms of healthcare and preventative care. So I'll give you some examples. At NJK, we have a very large respiratory care business in oxygen concentration globally. And if you think of some of the problems today, there's over 380 million people who suffer from COPD. And unfortunately, that 70% of the related health costs are due to when patients have exacerbations and have to go to the emergency room. So it's not sort of hard, it's not a stretch, that being able to monitor patients at home with, whether it be a patch or a watch, that has an ability to monitor their respiratory rate, their SpO2, and then using AI, which, convolutional neural networks are all around us today, to being able to predict those exacerbations. So the physician can be notified before they have to go to the emergency room, or looking at trending. So I think these are real things that we can see today.
Yeah, sounds like it's really focusing on preventative care, which is something we're always talking about. But now with apps and mobile, it really can become more of a reality.
Yeah, I definitely think so, and I think that's an area where the industry really just has to focus on how do we keep people out of the hospital. Another example, I think, is wound care. Recently, I was attending a conference of the World Healing and Wound Center earlier in the year in the Middle East, and you can see a lot of research being done on how can you accelerate healing of wounds when you think about it, and also wound prevention. So for us here at NGK, we have a core competency in plasma. So it was very interesting seeing some of these scientific papers that were presented there on how you can use, plasma devices to actually accelerate the healing of chronic wounds. And again, putting it in perspective, 50 million people around the world have a chronic wound that's disabling. And you may know someone, friends or family who may have diabetes. All it takes for them, if they're elderly, is to really, touch a table. They're thin. Their skin can be very thin. They develop a chronic wound. Then you've got regular wound dressing. If it's not treated well, this can last for years. So I think the healthcare and the medical industry, we've got a large role to play in this shift from hospital at home to developing these tech-enabled solutions that deliver care, because we want to have a focus on prevention rather than sort of reactive care.
Right. And that really is going to impact their quality of life as well. Imagine you have this chronic wound and now you don't have to because there's a treatment for it.
Exactly. And I think we can see that, there's numerous areas. I mean, I think everyone's very familiar with cardiac monitoring. There's a lot of research being done in using watches to look at the detection of AFib. So long are the days where we used to go in and wear a Holter monitor and 16 different electrodes, and there's quite a large box that you'd have to try and live with in your life. So I think, in summary, I think this is where we've got to shift, because we can't continue to do what we've been doing.
Yeah. So I'd love to ask both Saurabh and Malvika if they have anything to add. Malvika, you were off for a few seconds, so I'll go to Saurabh first, and then we'll come to you. Saurabh, do you have anything to add in this area in terms of diagnostics?
Yeah, absolutely agreeing with Glenn, basically. But on the part where artificial intelligence is more and more implied in decision making, basically, and it goes far beyond diagnostics. I mean, I'll come back to digital patient twins that from the trends, basically, and I'll take this as a specific example of autonomy. And this is a DTP. What they do is they image organs of human patients, and in a way, by making copies of these patients digitally, many patients, they can cut the cost down of clinical trials. How do they do this, basically? So imagine a medical device being tested on real patients where you have to pay high recruitment fees for patients. Imagine now this medical device being tested digitally on virtuous copies of these patients. And then, if initial faults, let's say, setbacks of this medical device, which you can already tamper with, or you can change, basically, before you go to actual clinical trials, thereby reducing the cost of the actual clinical trial by a great deal. And this is not just, I mean, of course, there is a massive need in the market for the patient and the doctor's side, healthcare professional side, but it's also that the overall cost from the top down is also cutting down, basically.
Yeah, it's a win-win, isn't it?
Sorry?
It's win-win, all sides. The quality of care, cost of care.
Exactly, it's a win-win situation. Malvika, what do you think?
Yeah, no, totally agree with that. I mean, we work a lot with, both big biopharma companies, but also CROs who are always asking, like, how do we bring more digital? How do we cut down costs of doing trials? And I mean, of course, with COVID, we saw a lot of clinical trials in many areas were suspended for many reasons. And so we've hit on a few of these points, right? But I think having these digital tools like opens up not just like new ways to measure, but, potentially accelerates testing for other diseases, and especially for trials where things were stopped. Now we can like do certain things at home we couldn't do before. And so I think this is an area that is definitely has been accelerated by COVID and is probably here to stay. So we're quite excited. digital intervention on the clinical side as well.
I mean, I might add one more point very quickly, because this is another example that really is at the top of my head, and I really like it. So, I mean, normally the MRI machines, magnetic resonance imaging machines, are massive. I don't know if any of you has ever seen them in hospitals. Basically, I hope that you didn't have a chance to, but yeah.
In movies, you see them, right?
Yes, these are massive machines basically, and imagine if somebody needs this machine to be checked, but this person cannot come to the hospital. This machine cannot be brought to the home. But now with artificial intelligence, and because these machines, what they need is a symmetric magnetic field. And this is why these machines are so massive. But with artificial intelligence, you can take a asymmetric magnetic field, and via the AI, you make it symmetric, thereby greatly reducing the size to the point where they are portable. And this is one of the DTPs that Deep Spin has been doing. And I mean, for me, this was really mind-blowing. Imagine an MRI machine going to your home and bam.
Right. Or even maybe you have one of those vans that's out on the street and people can just come and get their MRI right there in the van.
Totally, yeah.
So many potentials. So Malvika, you were talking about testing at home. So let's go from there into COVID-19, which I think it's clear won't be the last pandemic in our lifetime. Why is that, first of all? Why does that seem so clear now? And what is our current state of readiness for future pandemics?
Yeah, it's always a good question to have, figure out how to predict the future. But like was mentioned, COVID-19 on the rise again in many parts of the world, monkeypox on the rise. So just taking a step back, like there have been multiple modeling studies that have shown that that estimate that the probability of having these novel disease outbreaks will probably grow 3 times in the next few decades. So that's going to happen. And so you asked, why is that? There are several drivers. I mean, demographics being one, population growth, changes in our food system, environmental degradation. We are coming into more frequent contact between humans and animals that carry disease. So these are all, significant factors that are driving, potential outbreaks going forward. Antibiotic resistance has been highlighted by many people. It's responsible for almost 700,000 deaths, and it's expected to hit 10 million by 2050. And so these are just some of the drivers in terms of readiness level. I mean, we learned a lot from COVID, but there's still many obstacles that don't make me feel like we're 100% there yet. I have hope that we'll get there. But just to list out a few, and would open it up to everyone else to add a few thoughts here. We still don't really have amazing real-time disease surveillance tools, like on a macro level and a micro level. How do we figure out what the disease is? Where is it? Where are the hotspots? A lot of the technologies we have are still lagging indicators. We find out after that, New York had a peak. This had a peak. But like knowing precisely where and what it is, what the variant is, we still don't have that. We still don't have amazing therapeutics for even COVID-19. We started with, injectables that are hard to administer at home. Now we have some oral small molecules, but that was a 2-year delay. There was an amazing breakthrough in vaccines, but we still don't have, the durability of these vaccines is still a concern. We still have a lot of, we still need boosters. There are supply chain issues. So a lot of promise, but I think, we need to still hit on a few, we still need to overcome a few things to be truly ready for the next big pandemic.
Right. The pandemic really just opened our eyes as to where we were lacking.
Yeah.
So Rob, anything to add?
I mean, we are, let me go something like what Malvika just touched upon, antibiotic resistance. I mean, and she also gave the numbers that 700,000 people are dying every year because of antibiotic resistance. And without even having the pandemics that are coming out of, let's say, permafrost melting or deforestation, or coming in touch with animals, which are additional pandemic scenarios, basically. We have this one looming over us. This one will certainly go ahead. And what massively has been going on in the antibiotic discovery field for a while has been what Fleming did, the guy who discovered penicillin. People have been trying to replicate or find a new biological which can act exactly like penicillin. But that's like trying to have a miracle again. Instead, what molecular biology has done has brought on technologies where they will, things like CRISPR, basically, they are startups like Phagomed or the one Tobix Bio, basically mentioned in the trends. And what they're using CRISPR basically to have a stronger selection pressure so that the antibiotic resistance can be dealt with. And I mean, this is thinking out of the box, but these technologies are being developed for the moment. I don't know how successful they would be. And I really hope they are successful before we are in that situation where antibiotic resistance is declared a pandemic. But yes, I mean, I totally agree that we have no real-time surveillance at the moment to say if something will come up so fast.
Mm-hmm. So again, we're in that position of being reactive, looking at what's happening or happened, and trying to react and do triage after the fact. So let's go from there then. So to examples like Pfizer and BioNTech, which came together during the pandemic to be kind of this heroic collaboration. So we've seen how important collaborations between these multinational established companies and the lean, agile startups are, especially in healthcare. So let me see. Let's go back to Glenn. What's your perspective on what's worked well for NGK in terms of doing collaboration?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think I've been very fortunate to have lived in both worlds. So, started off with a startup and then a large corporation like Siemens, and then also back to the startups. I think living in the Bay Area, I feel you're often seduced by the dark side as you sit down at Starbucks and everyone's in a startup. And I think one of the benefits of, collaborating with startups is, I think by their inherent nature, they're very disruptive. I think you find the team of co-founders, and typically the team, they may or may not even come from within the industry or the market segment that they're actually trying to disrupt. So I think you do see different opinions. There's no doubt, I feel, they're bringing new ideas to challenge a problem. I think any startup has a sense of urgency. And for those of you on the line who are in a startup, I think when I say the word burn rate is very different to a budget. I think once you've got, seed or invested funding, whether it's Series A or Series B, there's a limit to that of when you then have to go back to the market to seek more capital. That in itself brings a sense of urgency that is not necessarily associated with a budget, which is, I have X to spend, but I don't worry about, next year I'll have X plus more, or maybe I might have a slight reduce. I think so that ecosystem of where there's a true sense of urgency really does bring a phenomenal synergy, because then you have people who are small, very discreetly focused, and then you can combine that with a larger business. I think you get the best of both worlds. I think that's probably Pfizer BioNTech is just a perfect example of that.
It is.
And I think the other additive I was going to say was I think there's no doubt, people who come out of university or college are also very drawn to being in an association with a disruptive technology, and small startups that also have a bigger social picture. I think, the topic today about inclusive health and how we want to, I think, today's generation is far more in tune with solving some of the problems of access to care. And I think they're probably a little bit more socially aware of what they want to do with their career, which lends them to that.
That's a great point. And I want to point out that NGK started off as a spark plug company, I think 80 years ago. And now you've just embraced this agile way and understanding that you need to adapt and transform, and that collaborations with startups can be a great way to do that.
Oh, absolutely. I think, it's a key part of, it's a key component really of our overall strategy of how we're trying to, forge the company into new paths of whether it be mobility or infrastructure, and home healthcare and healthcare as a whole. Yes.
Malvika, what are you seeing from your viewpoint at BCG, working with different clients? Share with us.
Yeah, I mean, I think Glenn hit on some really great points. And right now, given current biotech markets, and Glenn mentioned burn rates, this is a hot topic for many people. We work with both, startups and, of course, all the major large biopharma companies. And there's this question of what does a great partner look like? As most of the innovation is, I think, over 50% of new drugs are going to come from these smaller companies. So we get asked, like, how do we figure out the right partner? And I think the Pfizer example is a great one. It highlights starting early with the partnership. I think maybe not commonly known, but Pfizer had this relationship with BioNTech back in 2018 they were looking at mRNA vaccines for influenza. So it wasn't something that just came out of the blue. So having that, it's really important in these kinds of partnerships to start early, build up that partnership, understand who brings what to the table. And in this case, right, we see a lot of the big biopharma companies, they have these massive distribution, massive, sales forces that can, accelerate these partnerships. And right now we are seeing a lot of those questions come up. We haven't seen, M&A actually pick up at all this year. It's been quite low, despite, a lot of analysts and folks predicting that valuations, because they're low, whether they'll pick up in the second half of the year, that's the real question. But actually this first half of the year, we haven't seen that. And there's possibly a few reasons. And, pharma companies are constantly looking at what is our pipeline portfolio? What should we, what do we have to bring in to accelerate? But right now, I think there's been a lot of focus in building out platforms for these smaller biotech companies, and not so much focus on actually a drug that may have a more tangible value. And so it's hard for a pharma company to go and maybe buy an overvalued platform if it hasn't yet shown its potential. So that's just a trend we're seeing, and we haven't seen M&A pick up to the point that that folks are expecting. But I think it's coming. But these are just questions we get all the time. So just wanted to share.
And it sounds like you plant your seeds and then you wait for the right moment to harvest.
Yeah, you have to take that risk. So some people take a little bit of that risk earlier on. I would say Pfizer took a risk with mRNA before some other companies saw the potential, and it paid off for them. Great. So
it did. And Saurabh, so at Hello Tomorrow, they play this catalytical role in bringing together startups and corporations. So can you tell us a little more about that?
Yeah, I mean, first I have to agree with what the points that Glenn and Malvika put together, and the one thing that Glenn said, and it really struck me, basically, that the financial goals of startups and corporates are very different. For corporates, it's basically to put the product in the market. For startups, to stay afloat, to stay alive. What startups are looking for are investments. What corporates are looking for is to bring the product faster in the market, basically. And even though that both are financial goals, from each one perspective, it goes in opposite direction, basically, because startups need, as I said, money to stay afloat. But at the same time, they lack distribution capabilities, they lack channels, they lack global supply chains, they lack the expertise around regulations. But corporates are experts in these things, because corporates have mastered this in their long experience. They are experts in incremental innovation, whereas startups in disruptive innovation. And I mean, bringing these together is what exactly Hello Tomorrow does. We liaison the two together, and this is what we have been doing with NGK as well. But coming to basically just collaborations in general, the collaborations in the ecosystem go far, far beyond startup corporate collaboration is the most important thing, I think, that is needed or that is happening in healthcare at the moment. But given what happened during the pandemic, if Pfizer was the only company manufacturing the mRNA vaccines or doing everything, I do not think we would have gained the 1 billion doses that we gained. What a lot of people do not know is that competing corporates came together. Pfizer, Sanofi, Novartis. Imagine these are all competing companies, basically. They came together. Pfizer worked with Sanofi and Novartis, companies like these, basically, to produce the mRNA vaccines to bring them faster to the market. Sanofi and Novartis, their own candidates did not make it to the market, but they still gained because they collaborated. And this is what is called co-petition, basically, not competition. The market is really heading towards co-petition. And like, for instance, Moderna went with Lonza. So Moderna was a startup going with Lonza. But then, as I said, even Lonza had multiple distribution channels, which encompassed many other corporates. So the overall idea is to bring the ecosystem together, to mobilize the ecosystem. And this is where we at Hello Tomorrow play a very important role.
Right. And I think mobilize is the word, right? The pandemic really just mobilized everyone. We had no choice but to cooperate and put aside maybe our more, individualistic goals and really focus on the greater good. So that's an aspect of the pandemic that I really appreciate. So let's go back, Malvika, you started to talk about investments. Let's go a little bit deeper into what happened maybe because of the pandemic, what we're seeing now in terms of investment in the biotech landscape. Do you want to give us a little more color there? Yeah. And then Glenn, I'd be curious to know what's happening at NGK in terms of your R&D strategy. So
of course.
Yeah, no, happy to just cover a few main points. I mean, the COVID-19 and in general, the massive amount of money that went into the overall life science industry spurred tons of, I guess, just innovative companies. And also a lot of companies, used that moment to raise record numbers of funds in terms of, we had a record number of companies IPOing in the past couple years. A lot of sort of generalist investors, so folks that typically don't cover life sciences, and there's some crossover, some tech investors, these kinds of groups came into the life science sectors because they were just so excited by what we had done for COVID. And so that spurred a lot of growth. Now what we're seeing is a bit of like a correction. Frankly, these past few months have been very hard for many startups that have had to, course correct and prioritize. And at BCG, what we do, right, is we kind of play this role of advising and working with our clients and mainly giving, couple lines of advice here, right, is like, how do you prioritize is, the main question. You maybe during COVID, you were able to do 30 research programs, but now you have to cut back and choose your top 5 that are going to make it. Doesn't mean you can't do the other 25 when the market comes back. Interest rates are, right now not quite high. And so there's general market trends, but also things specific to biotech where it just accelerated so quickly. And now we're correcting. Now companies are prioritizing on what they should focus on to then, raise in an environment again where they can actually get more capital. So we're not investors, but we help think about where can companies really get the most bang for the money they have.
And it's true what you say in terms of perspective. Like we really have to understand that this was an anomaly in the landscape. Yeah. It's not something that's just going to continue in a linear fashion.
Exactly.
So Glenn, I know that NGK has an actual venture fund that you're actively investing. You're obviously actively collaborating. What's your take on that?
Yeah. I mean, I think, we have a very large sort of internal research and development, a history of developing internal projects. So, and I have quite a large team actually in Japan who are doing so. But also I think we realized that we did have to make a very much a commitment. To going out in the market and actually finding startups and opportunities in these different areas, whether it be healthcare, mobility, or infrastructure. So we actually started a $100 million sort of fund with Pegasus Technology Ventures based in San Jose. And this is, I think it's been a really significant chapter when you think of not only the psychology of doing that, but also it's been phenomenal in the amount of how this has attracted, very innovative startups to begin the conversations with us, as well as also knowing that when you do find, particular opportunities, you have a mechanism to which you can then actually execute. So that's very important. So, I think we've been really thrilled over the last few months where we've closed on several strategic investments And for us, this is a way of securing the future. And I think also, I think it's a great commitment. You know, sometimes the opportunities are when no one else is buying, to be honest. So I think you've also got to think about that from a smart investor perspective. You know, particularly here in Silicon Valley, you know, pricing and valuations are very, very high, or have been. Maybe now they're coming a little bit back to earth.
More affordable.
So I think you know, sometimes, like everything, there are different. You can view things through different lenses. So I think there's no doubt there's a lot of opportunity, and there's a lot of very smart people who are doing really quite amazing things. So we're glad to be a part of that.
And Glenn, you've worked.
Oh yeah, no, I was just. Go ahead, Renita. Go ahead.
Sorry. So you're on board with that. So Glenn, NGK has worked with Hello Tomorrow, or has helped you in terms of connecting with these startups. How has that been?
Yeah, I think that's sort of circling back to my original sort of comments when I started. I think you have to really understand your business, and you have to really acknowledge your internal competencies. And I think for us, it was very clear we needed to find a strategic partner to help us on this journey, not only in setting up ways that we can converse and have discussion with different startups that, you know, maybe through a normal day-to-day basis we wouldn't. So for us, you know, Hello Tomorrow has been very important in helping us, you know, understand and explore those different opportunities. Particularly in Europe, I think they've played a huge role for us in being able to, you know, find and understand those opportunities. So I think it's important to understand what you'd really do well as a company, and then what really you're okay at. But you know what? I think if we partner with someone, we can really leverage our internal talents and competencies, but also just really smart organizations. So for me, it's been a pleasure, as I think, because it broadens our outlook. And at the end of the day, I think, you know, our role, and Saurabh, you mentioned this very well, as a large, you know, global company, our role is to bring technologies to commercialization that help people, and startups are a phenomenal way of which you can partner. So there's a synergy between people who are passionate about their technology. And I think, you know, we're very passionate about bringing things to life, because, you know, I know this may sound trite, but to me, it's how do you help people spend more time living at the end of the day? For me, that's what drives me.
Oh, that's it, isn't it? Saurabh, would you like to just add a few words?
Yeah, I mean, listening to both Malvika and Glenn, so I have one question basically. So I know that startups, as in general, what we were talking about, investments went really increased during the pandemic. And one example is basically the number of the investment in mRNA field went from 15 billion to 300 billion in an year, basically. Okay, it's madness. So of course it had to come down, and it will start growing sustainably from now on. But that's the part of investment, basically. Let's say now I have two questions, basically, one to Glenn and one to Malvika. So my question to Glenn is like, okay, one thing is co-development and another is M&A, and how much you focus on co-development and how much you focus on M&A at NGK. That's just to get an idea of the strategy at NGK. And to Malvika is basically, we all know that the market is basically will grow sustainably, but this is talking about investments in general. What about the valuations of individual companies? What is happening with that? But yeah, my questions to both of them, I mean, yes.
Malvika, I'll let you go first. Ladies before gentlemen.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I guess to be frank, we typically don't value companies as like more of a consulting firm, but we obviously look, certain platforms are going to be valued more than others. But on the private side, we still see generally for private companies, valuations are still quite high, depending on, you know, the space you're in, and certain complex therapies, like even a lot of RNA companies are valued quite high. On the public markets overall, right, we have seen a drop. But I think you know, we are seeing, like I said, a corrective year. can't comment on specific companies, but we'll say like a lot of exciting news and things about like new CRISPR base editing, all these new technologies. Those companies are, I would say, still valued quite high. And because there's still like a lot of promise, and we still haven't actually seen all the data come out yet. So I think this year will actually be fairly exciting for some of these next gen, like more personalized, complicated medicines. And so we'll see. But yeah, I think valuations are definitely on the lower side than what we've seen the last couple of years. So.
I mean, CRISPR and gene therapies, they were supposed to be the miracle before mRNA came. This pandemic arrived in the market now, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Glenn?
Yeah. I mean, I think to answer your question, I think it's really situational. So I think it also depends on where the startup is in their, in their funding. And also, the most important thing is cultural fit. And I think you can see that where it really, you're trying to bring to an organization in any investment. I know it's, may seem flippant, but it's 1 and 1 doesn't just make 2. You want to make sure that it's actually more than the sum of your combined parts. So I think it really depends on the organization and what their vision is too. I mean, they, I think a lot of co-founders are fiercely independent. So, they're looking at, initially, they're always looking to, how can I get smart money? It's pretty, if their technology is very exciting, it's pretty easy that people, and Malvika, you know this very well, they can get a lot of choices. 2 years ago, if you had a tech-enabled service, people would almost throw money at you. And you just had to mention the word subscription. That was a tech-enabled service. Okay, what are you doing? But I think today, I think startups are trying to look for, how can you help me get to market? How can you help me commercialize? Because I think they're realizing, that last mile to the customer is probably the hardest. And I think we all know that, even if you've got a good AIR of like, say, 1 million, and you're very proud, that 1 million to 10, that's a significant scaling issue. So I think those are some of the challenges, I think, that where collaborations and being strategic with who you find as your partner is very critical. But at the end of the day, you've got to have this cultural fit. You've got to have a similar vision that you then build trust upon.
Yeah, exactly. So I think we're coming to the end of our time together. I'd like to end with just a quick one-liner from each of you. And Glenn, you kind of gave us a hint with you want people to spend more time just living. What's the best case scenario of collaboration, this ecosystem mobilization, the vision of the future of healthcare? What's the one tagline you'd like to leave with the audience?
I think it's having a passion for what you do. And then I think that leads to, to me, it's having a passion for what you do. And I encourage
very clear
people,
that you have that.
Yeah, I suppose I do. But yeah, I think that's my thing. Have a passion for what you do. And if you're not passionate what you do, find something that you are at, you want to do. And then that drives you to and then spend more time living. There we are.
Thank you. Malvika?
I think for me, the one word would be acceleration. Just this, I think with partnership, with so much unmet need, making things more inclusive, affordable. I think to me, it's all about, we have amazing technology, just accelerate it, and we can get there. And partnership is really the way to do it. So acceleration through partnership.
So agree. I would add the word leverage, and then we've got that high velocity. So Rob, take us home.
Ecosystem mobilization. I mean, for me, this really is the key word that is really driving a lot of things in the technology world right now, and the business world right now. For me, this is really one of the things that, how Glenn was saying, I'm passionate about, and to bring basically inclusive and affordable healthcare. For me, this ecosystem mobilization, inclusivity and affordability for me, this is really, really the passion, let's say.
Yeah. So mobilize, leverage, accelerate, and then just add the fuel of passion. I think that's the secret formula we've discovered. So thank you all for joining us today. Thanks to everyone who came. Check your inbox for that report on the Inclusive and Affordable Healthcare Report. There's so much information in there that you're going to find useful. And we will see you next time. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.